Welcome to Texans Unfiltered.
Here we go!
A Houston football podcast for your Houston Texans.
All right, guys, welcome back to another edition of Texans Unfiltered. I am Young Ari Gold, and I'm here with my friend and co-host John Wade, the Garnet Texan. Texans Unfiltered is brought to you by Run Game Clothing. Go to rungameclothing.com. Use promo code Unfiltered for 15% off of your entire purchase. Make sure you guys are paying attention to Run Game Clothing after a World Series win. Once that happens, what is that, tomorrow night, John?
Yeah, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Okay, so either tomorrow night or Wednesday. So either way, make sure you guys pay attention to Run Game. Follow them on Twitter and Instagram at Run Game Clothing. We're still looking for somebody to run the Instagram account because I don't want to do it. So if somebody else wants to, fantastic. Outside of that, let's hop right into it. John, another week of starting slow.
Yeah. Except it wasn't just the first, quarter this time. It was almost the entire first half, it felt like. Like we just couldn't get it going, and we really needed to. I mean, granted, the defense of the Raiders is not bad. They have a very, very stout defensive line, but this was a team that we really should have been able to move the ball a little bit easier than we did, and it just took a little bit too long before we started to do it. But of course, Deshaun doing Deshaun things and did some amazing things. It just kind of, worked out.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like, did you end up going to the Blind Pig?
No, I got lazy.
You just stayed home?
Yeah, I got lazy.
Okay. Yeah, it's weird because, this offense tends to just start off slow, and then when they need to do something is when they do something, instead of doing those things at the beginning to where they're not ever in a position where they need to do something.
Well, and what was frustrating about them wasn't just that they weren't moving the ball. That's not entirely true. They were moving the ball, but it was just penalty after penalty after penalty. And Chris Clark got a nice reminder why he was a street free agent. It was just,
oh God,
it was so ugly. And then they adapted, and it's something that we've complained about with Bill O'Brien in the past, but I think this season he's actually starting to get it, is they have been quicker to do adjustments. And they made some adjustments and went to more 12 personnel. There was a formation that was, I mean, it was more or less a modified wishbone is what it looked like to me, that you're keeping both tight ends almost in as H-backs, as either max protect to the maximum, to trading it out to where they could actually run out and do routes. And that formation really seemed to kind of spark them, and they just started to move the ball. And, Deshaun, again, we're going to talk, I'm sure, a whole bunch about him, but that's really what it all came down to. Somebody other than Deshaun, it's not working.
Well, I don't know. I mean, Darren Fells, even though, yes, Deshaun had to throw the ball, like that last touchdown, I don't know if the average tight end is going to make that catch. Like, that guy was right in his face, but because Darren is so big, he was able to just kind of go up there and get it. And it wasn't, I mean, I don't know. I think Darren Fells had a really good day too. I don't think he's getting much of the love that he deserves, from whether it's the touchdown or to seal the game on that conversion for a first down to get into victory formation.
Yeah, that relationship between Deshaun Watson and Darren Fells has become something. It's like, I know Darren Fells joked about when he came in, he's the left tackle, but he's come out here and he's been a player. I mean, we thought that it would be Akins getting all the receptions and Fells just being more in line, more of a blocking tight end. But I mean, Fells just comes up with big play after big play after big play every single week. And dude's not a slouch. Like, he's not an offensive lineman that can happen to catch the ball. He's a legitimate athlete.
Yeah, no, he is. And I mean, he's a great blocker, and it obviously helps, but I mean, he's just been great in the passing game. And it's funny because, you know, at the beginning of training camp, all we heard was how bad he was at catching the ball and how he had drops. And that was not a part of his game and that he was brought in just to block. And then you look and see what he's done, through 8 weeks, and he's been able to do so many things once he catches the ball. And he's truly a red zone. He's a red zone threat, and it's something we talked about before the season started, was that we expected that to be the case. But he's playing well. So Deshaun was great. Obviously, the play, where he gets kicked in the face and all that is huge. But the conversions on third down with his legs, he really started getting going in the second half, John.
Yeah, he did. And he just opens things up. When he's going and he's seeing the field, he opens up the field for everybody else. We were able to start running the ball. We were able to start moving the ball. And it was just one of those, again, this may turn into a Watson cast. It wasn't his best game. It wasn't his most eye-popping game from a statistical standpoint. But if you sat there and you actually watched the game, especially the second half, like that was one of the gutsiest performances I've ever seen from one of our quarterbacks. Our offensive line, especially because of Chris Clark, just regressed. And then Tunsil got hurt. And then it was like, oh my God, it was scary there for a minute. And Deshaun started playing better. Like he just had no protection, no push on the running game. And he started opening it up. He opened up the running lanes. He literally took over. And again, 2 weeks ago, he had better stats. 3 weeks ago, he had way better stats. But this game, I would say he played the better quarterback position.
Yeah, it's almost as if Deshaun's better when there's this function on the offense. Like when things aren't going right, that's when you're going to see Deshaun Watson be Deshaun Watson.
He seems to thrive in chaos. More so than this isn't. Not that he thrives in unscripted plays, because he does, but when there's just chaos going on and he shouldn't be doing what he's doing, that's actually when he plays better.
Yeah, and with Chris Clark being at right tackle, that's going to have to change this week. I know Roderick Johnson wasn't much better the week prior, but he's better than Chris Clark. Like Chris Clark was awful yesterday. I mean, he really was. We're better off with Kendall Lamb being our starting right tackle.
Yeah, Chris Clark was just undersized. He would just get straight run over. There was no push from him at all. With Roderick, Roderick had some down plays, and he messed up some, but he was at least getting pushed on the ball, and he was able to push people around. And that just doesn't happen with Chris Clark. Chris Clark is literally a speed bump.
Yeah, he was just awful. But, okay, so let's get into just the game in general. So obviously a slow start from the offense in general. But, the run game on paper was a lot better than what it was on film. Like there were times where Carlos was going, but in the first half, we couldn't get anything going on the ground.
No, and that, again, ties back to Deshaun. Like this is going to be the theme in this podcast. If y'all aren't tired about it, you might get tired about it. But Deshaun opened up the running lanes because the offensive line did not. And Carlos Hyde, I love that man. I know he's only on a 1-year deal, but I hope we keep him. I hope that there's no temptation to bring back Alfred Blue or anything like that. Let's just keep Hyde. Dude, he's been a player for us, and he just plays with such emotion. He hasn't been like a world beater. He's an okay fantasy running back, but for what we need and what we need out of the running back position, he's been phenomenal.
Yeah, and what's crazy is that Duke Johnson literally had 3 carries. The entire game. He had 3 carries. Now, in the passing game, he had 4 catches for 33 yards and obviously a touchdown. By the way, that touchdown was a grown man touchdown.
Yeah. No, Duke Johnson's a great player too.
No, but what I'm saying specifically, when he went in there and held it with one hand above his head and got hit straight in the ribs and fell on his ass, but held onto the ball and still scored a touchdown. Like that's crazy.
Dude is a lot tougher than a scat back or receiving back or whatever you want to call him. Him and him and Carlos Hyde really do balance each other out. They are both very physical runners. Duke Johnson operates better with space. When there is no space, he's not going to run through people, but he can make them miss. And that touchdown, I mean, he didn't really run through him, but he kind of dragged the guy. And that, again, was just a great play. I've gotten no complaints about our running back. I don't think that our issues with the running game yesterday, especially in the first half, was not on either one of the runners. It was entirely on the offensive line. And props to the Texans for kind of realizing that and using Deshaun, open up the running lanes. And once Deshaun became more of a threat to run and Oakland had to start respecting that, that's when there was room there for Carlos Hyde to get to work. And for Duke Johnson, I mean, 3 carries, but he was still very active in the receiving game. Granted, I think he only ended up with like 3 receptions. It wasn't even a ton, but he got the touchdown.
No, I agree. It's funny how when Deshaun starts to scramble outside the pocket, that's when things start to change with the offense. But yeah, I mean, that's exactly when the running lanes started to open. This offensive line is missing Titus Howard, quite a bit in all aspects of the offensive line, from run game to pass protection. We need him back, and luckily after this week we have a bye. I don't expect him back after the bye because it is an MCL, but I know that's what people think. I honestly would expect him back probably the end of November. And that's just speculation, but
yeah, I mean, I have no idea. My fear with it is Titus Howard, part of how he was able to overcome a lot of his rookie mistakes, because he made a lot of mental errors, but he is so strong and so fast for a tackle that he was just able to cover for them. Him coming back early or him coming back on a bum knee, I mean, he's still going to be strong, but he's not going to look as good as he did prior to the knee until that knee gets a little bit better.
Well, I mean, without Titus, the offensive line just isn't what we expected to be, especially after seeing what we did against Atlanta and Kansas City. So it's funny for everybody that complained,
and we need him healthy.
Yeah, for everybody that complained about us taking him over Dillard. I mean, this is really working out to where he's looking like the player that you would take in a first round. Like we hit.
Yeah, he's looking like the better player than
Dillard's
Dillard.
Struggling right now.
Granted, I think it's because they have Dillard on the left side. I haven't watched enough, but just Howard put him on the right side, and he is actually doing better than Dillard. And we all said it, including myself, that maybe we wanted Dillard because he was more polished, he was more ready to go. But it's amazing what size and strength and speed they can kind of negate polish. And even my original complaint, like I was happy with Howard. I just thought we could have traded back and gotten an extra second round pick. I mean, like you said, if he turns out to a player, who cares? And he looks like he is a player, and you can see the difference that it makes that he's now been hurt to our offense.
Yeah. DeAndre Hopkins, back-to-back 100-yard games. DeAndre was amazing on Sunday. He really was, outside of Darren Fells, our only true, I guess you could say, weapon. Kenny was kind of non-existent. Kiki was held out because I think Bill O'Brien thought the trade market would be higher for Kiki, and it's actually not because he can't stay healthy. And DeAndre Carter had one. That was a big play, the one catch for 46 yards. But outside of that, I mean, DeAndre was the offense yesterday. He was the passing game.
Yeah, and it's hilarious. People are trying to trade for Hopkins.
Yeah, that's pretty.
Can't blame them. I mean, it's one of those. It's like, shoot your shot. I mean, shoot your shot. You're gonna get turned down, but just shoot your shot.
So what would you trade DeAndre Hopkins for?
What all did we trade out for Tunsil and then some? Yeah. So if it took 2 first rounds and a second rounder to get Tunsil, it would take, I would say, 3 first rounders and 2 second rounders to get Hop.
Okay.
And I'm not even kidding. Best receiver in the game. Right now, he's not even the highest paid receiver in the game, and he's on a contract. So and you've got to literally blow us away to even consider doing it. And he's a drama-free receiver. that alone's worth a first round pick.
Yeah, I mean, I think for DeAndre, the only trade I would take would be it would have to be top 5 picks for the next 2 years for me to even listen. So it would have to be the Dolphins, the Redskins, and that's it. Those are the only 2 teams that I would say that I feel comfortable will be picking in the top 5 the next 2 years. So I would need 2 firsts at least from the Redskins, and you'll have to give me Trent Williams.
Maybe.
I mean,
doubtful.
Two top 5 picks back-to-back years.
Yeah, I'd still no.
I don't know. I think I would. I mean, because think about it. Like, then you can draft. I mean, you could literally draft the best wide receiver in either draft and have him for 5 years on a rookie deal.
Yeah, but then you also have the risk that they are a bust.
Yeah, you do. But typically,
And
top 5 picks aren't busts.
Typically, but they do happen.
They do happen.
Especially at something like receiver.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, Corey Davis wasn't top 5; he was a top 8. That might be partly the quarterback's issue. But look up in Tennessee how he's done. And who was the last top 5 receiver? Like, who out there was that talented that went in the top 5?
Honestly, I don't know.
So I think Corey Davis was the last top 10. Unless I'm blocking somebody out, because we've only had 1 pick in the past 3 years, so I don't pay attention. But that's entirely my point. And DeAndre Hopkins he was taken 23rd. Like, you never know when it comes to receivers. When it comes to draft picks, I believe in volume, and there's just too much of a risk, especially when somebody's an established superstar. So yeah, it would have to be a whole lot.
Yeah, I'm trying to look it up right now. Let me see. So, yeah, there were none last year. I don't think there were any in 2018 either. So yeah, you might be right. It might be Corey Davis, and he's not looking like he's going to be much. I mean, they ended up taking AJ Brown. Actually, Corey Davis was a top 5 pick. He was literally number 5.
Was he?
Yeah.
No kidding. Well, and this is what I would say about the difference between Corey Davis and DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins would have made Mariota look good.
Correct.
And Corey Davis wasn't able to do that. Now, again, Mariota may have been the problem with Corey Davis and why he hasn't been able to produce. But, I mean, you've looked at some of the receivers that have thrown to Hop, or some of the quarterbacks that have thrown to Hop. Like, we would have definitely traded any of them.
Amari Cooper, the one was the top 5 wide receiver prior to Corey Davis. I think looking back on that now and seeing how impactful he is to Dallas's offense, I think I think Amari Cooper is on the right team, a top 5 wide receiver from a draft perspective. Anyways, all right. DeAndre Hopkins is not getting traded, so it really doesn't matter. I mean, from the offensive perspective, obviously, just Deshaun was amazing. He won us the game. He did what he was supposed to do. The defense did its job to close out and force a punt. Gary Conley was on that final throw that forced the punt by knocking the ball out of the wide receiver's hands. So that was a great sign. I didn't expect Gary and Conley to come in and just light the world on fire this week. And I don't expect him to next week either. Actually, next week, just because of who he's playing, he should be able to, considering D.D. Westbrook's out for the year too. But I think with Gary and Conley, I think we saw moments of what we should come to expect on a consistent basis. And he had moments in the game where he was pretty good, and then he had moments in the game where he looked like he was playing in a brand new defense and a new scheme that he hasn't played with at all, except for 4 days of practice.
Yeah, when they let him just be an athlete, you could see what the appeal of him is. When they asked him to do anything that required thinking, you could see, it might take a minute. And I think that we got a steal with him, because to come out there after 2 days of practice and actually not look horrible. I mean, you can't complain about that. I mean, my worst fear with him was he was it would have been a waste of a trade. Like, he gets over to us and he's just as bad as the worst of the Oakland fans claimed he could be. But just based on what we saw from him yesterday, like, he's worth at least the third round pick. So that's good to see, and he's just going to get better through the year. I mean, obviously there's going to be some times where he's going to look completely lost out there because it is a new defense, but he's definitely a guy that can play.
Yeah, it's just going to take time. I mean, it's going to take time. I think I said, once Roby's back, we lost Lonnie for at least probably this game. Gibson wasn't out there. I think the lack of J-Joe, even though he's not the skilled corner he once was, I think his leadership and what he brings to the secondary is a big part
Right,
of
his ability to be a coach on the field.
Exactly.
Is just,
and we're seeing, and that's, a lot of people are like, oh my God, these corners are bad. Lonnie's bad. Like, Gary Conley didn't have a great game. Cornell Armstrong, crossing. It's like, okay, yeah, I agree. Like, there were moments where all three of them couldn't make a play and we're in the wrong spot or one or two steps behind. But, when J-Joe comes back, I feel like you're going to see a lot more coaching, a lot more developing. I think you'll see them I think J-Joe on the field at this point in his career as a veteran and from a leader perspective is really valuable, especially when you look at how young the secondary is as a whole. I mean, it's Justin Reed's second year. Roby's, fifth year, or sixth year, but, in a new defense. Lonnie Johnson's rookie year. Crossan, I think he's only a second year player in a new defense. Lonnie's obviously a rookie. Gary and Conley. So, I think J-Joe's value is there. I just don't think it's on the field in the sense of what we're used to seeing from a corner.
Yeah, this is a group that once they all get healthy and there's an actual rotation, we'll feel a lot better about them. I mean, we'll definitely feel a lot better than we did 2 weeks ago, even when they were healthy. We just got to essentially hold on tight for the next couple of weeks while people get healthy again. When you throw out Roby, Johnson, and Conley, that's a really solid starter. And you have J-Joe in there as a rotational piece that plays more of the zone. Switch him and Conley out based on situations. It's just, there's a lot of potential with that group. We just have to, survive until that group can be healthy.
Yeah. So from a defensive perspective,
now we've got to definitely sign. I was just going to say, now that with that group though, we really do need to re-sign Roby.
Yeah, we need to re-sign Roby.
I know he's on a prove-it deal, but we got to keep him.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that we need to do now, John. A lot has changed in the span of 24 hours for this team.
Yeah.
There's a conversation that needs to be had that I'm not sure a lot of people are ready to have. Yeah. We're going to have it for him. We're going to have it for him. So J.J. Watt was lost for the season yesterday with a torn pectoral. This will be his third injury that has put him out for the season, 3 out of 4 years. Now, I will say this. Luckily, it's a torn pectoral, and it's something that if JJ decides to fight through in rehab, if he can come back and do what he was doing this year, he's still a very valuable piece. But given the injuries that JJ has had and the rehab he has had to put his body through and where he's at in life, is that something that JJ wants to do?
That's what's going to be interesting. I think that they're going to have a discussion with him about his contract, which was almost up. It's almost up anyways.
I think he has one more year after this year.
And they're going to have a conversation about maybe even playing him as a full-time player. I know he has the desire to, but it's not about stamina at this point. It's about protecting him. If you put him out there, he gets hurt. And it's both good and bad that all three of these injuries have been to different parts of his body. That means they're all kind of freak injuries, but the fact that it's three different pretty significant injuries, it's like what's next on him? And he's going to be a Texan for as long as he wants to be a Texan. However, what's the smart move with him going forward? We've had this conversation in the past, and I even let it kind of blind myself when it came to talking about Clowney, and it's something that since we let Clowney go, I've even done a little bit of soul searching on. Because my genuine belief is you build a defense not on superstars. You build a defense on having as many above average players as possible. When you do that, that elevates your entire defense and makes a couple of your players, of course, look like superstars. When you sink all of this money and all these resources into a couple of superstars, that's where you end up in a situation kind of like where we're at, where we are so thin that when you lose somebody for the year, it's very traumatic. There's not a next man up. There just isn't. And with JJ Watt, and we've been very, very blessed to have him on the Texans. We really have. And this is one of those things that 5-10 years from now, when we're at when he's going into the Hall of Fame, that we'll get to sit there and we'll get to talk about him and tell our kids about, like, we probably aren't appreciating him as much as we should during his peak because we won't see something like that ever again. However, Bill Simmons said, it had to be like 20 years ago, and I'm sure they've renamed it now, what was called the Ewing effect, where the team actually elevates itself when there's no longer that star player that the entire team is built around taking care of. The only player in football that we should build our team around is Deshaun Watson. And we have attempted to build the defense around JJ. And what else can you do? He's an absolutely phenomenal player. He's a phenomenal person. He's a phenomenal leader. Again, not saying when we are blessed to have watched him play, but without him being in a role player type role in the future, we can't continue to build our defense around him and his strengths.
Yeah. I think, I've been really hard on JJ this year, and I've gotten a lot of flack for it. It's almost become a joke in the Discord and on Twitter, which is fair. I totally understand. And I think if you guys kind of looked at it from my perspective, I think you guys would understand a little bit more about why I am so hard on him. When we had Clowney, we never talked about the pressures. We never talked about the hits. We never talked about the almost plays. We never talked about the tackles for losses. What we talked about was the lack of sacks. And yet when we talk about JJ this year, everybody talks about his hits and pressures. And yet it's just crazy to me that narrative can be spun towards JJ. But prior to that, none of that was brought to any, conversation when Jadeveon Clowney was involved. So when it comes to JJ this year, my mindset has been very similar to the way that we treated Clowney, or not we, but, the fan base, the Texans fan base just acted like Jadeveon Clowney was just a rotational piece. And yet when you break down the stats and look at other parts of his game, pressures and hits, he was always in the top 5. And in tackles for losses, he was number 1. And so when it came to what JJ's done this season, I kind of came in with that same mentality. It's like, okay, we weren't talking about Jadeveon and what he was capable of doing because he didn't have the sack numbers. But yet this year, JJ's got 4 sacks, and all these quarterback hits and pressures, and yet we're praising him, saying, "Oh God, he's back to 2012." And I just find it funny. I think JJ's an amazing player. I think he's been an amazing player this year. I know I've been really hard on him. I've been very critical. I said I want to see him finish. I want to see more things, and I get that. And losing JJ Watt is going to suck for this year, and what we do with this contract and how that is handled moving forward. I'm not sure. We'll see. There's still too much time in the season for us to really get to that part of the business, as we have a season going on and we still have tons of games that we need to worry about. But I mean, how do I say this nicely? I think losing JJ Watt this season sucks, but I think it puts this franchise in a better position moving forward. And the reason for that is from a salary cap perspective. I'm not wishing injury on JJ. I hate that he got hurt. I would rather him play healthy and us figure out the salary cap later on. But with him getting hurt 3 out of the 4 years, it really brings to mind the fact that we need to start thinking about life after JJ as a Texan. Now, maybe it's 1-year deals moving forward. I would say that would probably be the most that would probably be the smartest move for us moving forward with JJ, is doing 1-year deals. Kind of how Tom Brady does in New England. I think that would be probably the best path for both involved, the Texans and JJ Watt. But I want to see what this team does without JJ Watt. I want us to evaluate the defensive line without JJ Watt. So going into next year, we have an idea on how we need to build this team. John brought it up earlier. The most important person on this team is no longer JJ Watt. It hasn't been for 2 years. Deshaun Watson is the most important player on this team. He's the most important person, most important asset to the franchise in general. There's been a shift. We discussed that the shift was going to happen with Deshaun Watson from JJ to Deshaun, because the quarterback position is just the most important position in all of sports. And now that transition's happening a lot sooner. With JJ gone and Deshaun being at the forefront, this team will only go as far as Deshaun. Protecting Deshaun, providing weapons with Deshaun. We're doing the things that we're supposed to do. You could talk about the value of Tunsil, however you want to bring it up, whatever it is that you want to talk about. The team is doing what they need to do to be able to protect the future of this team. And as much as I love JJ, and I was really I still am a huge JJ fan. A lot of, just like I said, everything that came from was the whole Clowney thing. But now it really gives the front office and the coaching staff a real opportunity to be able to see what this defense can do without JJ, and lets us really know where we need to go moving forward to fill holes. And it's unfortunate. It's not something you want. But I think long term, this is going to help the team. Does that make sense, John?
Yeah, and I think we're in agreement. Not happy about it. And I mean, I'm one of the guys that gave you a lot of crap for hating on JJ this year. And I am admittedly trying to spin this in the most positive way possible, because it just does feel like the end with JJ. And 2 years on the IR, you kind of was like, okay, he has a chance to come back. And then after last year, he put it all together, and this year he started it, and you felt like it was about to creep, it was about to turn, and now he's on the IR again. So at this point, it just feels like it's the end. And it's terrifying for the team, but our run defense is going to be fine. It's going to be, how do we generate a pass rush? That's what, at this point, that's what's terrifying. It's like we have Merciless, and hey, Merciless, if you want to go get your contract, now's your chance to get it. This is your world, dude. Go get that contract. But there's nobody else. And maybe Martin, Maybe he actually turns into this Dwight Feeney light that he's supposed to be, maybe. But at this point, there's a lot of hoping and a lot of praying, and our defense got a lot younger, and our secondary has to get healthy. And hopefully, I mean, at this point, it just doesn't feel like it feels like the end with JJ. Like, this is it.
Yeah, I'll say this. The one person in the world that I would never, ever, ever bet against is probably JJ Watt.
Fair enough. Absolutely fair enough.
And I think that's something that people do need to keep in mind, is that if there's anybody that's going to come back from this mentally and physically and be back to what he was this year, it's JJ. I mean, JJ has the work ethic, he has the team, he has the support. If anything, he's in a better support system now with having his fiance and things like that. I know that she was a part of it early on when he was hurt, but that was really the beginning of what their relationship was. Now it's a lot different. And I think that he has the ability to be able to get back and do it, just because it is JJ Watt, right? But at the end of the day, Father Time is undefeated. And when your body takes a toll, especially the toll that his body has taken, I mean, the position he plays is a very physical position. Lots of beatings, and just a lot of physicality. I mean, you have to play the game very physical to be able to be good at that position, as long as JJ was.
And don't forget, he put a lot of that physical toll on himself too, with the way that he trained. He pushed himself
Correct.
harder than probably anybody ever to be a superstar. And well, I mean, he's up there though.
In football, I'll say in football.
I mean, that's a very general statement, and it's a bunch of hyperbole, but I would say that he is in the top 1% of the amount of effort that he put into his training. Maybe 0.5%. There's probably a handful of other players out there that have put themselves through what JJ has, if you look at all sports. And it's one of those where maybe he's going to burn out brightly because of it. Like, he's shown, and he's shown like no other, but it's going to be one of those, just it's a quick flash. And if he can also, I think part of it may also be him coming back and here's the problem with him coming back as even part-time, though, is he was only at a 50% snap usage. And he was on the field every single play already. So I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I mean, his work ethic and what he's done and what he's and another part that we're leaving out that we need to keep in mind, and this is the part that I think people tend to add to what JJ is on the field, but what JJ has done for the community really can't be put into words. Yeah. What he's done with, whether it be the hurricane relief, all the things he does on Twitter, funerals paid for, and just JJ being Captain America and really wearing that all the time. He really has made an impact that most athletes would love to be able to make the impact he's made, and I would say that he is probably in the 0.2% of what he's actually accomplished off the field.
Yeah.
I really don't know if there's another. He's probably number one. I don't know if there's another athlete that has been able to do what JJ Watt has done off the field. With that in mind, though, and this is the part this is where it gets fuzzy. This is where it's hard for people to really dive into, but you have to separate those two. And it sucks because it's a business. And you would like for those two things to go hand in hand. Ultimately, though, that's just not the way the business is ran. You can't reward somebody for what they've done off the field on the field. You have to reward them for what they've done on the field. And even though up to this point, JJ has done a lot, and he's a Hall of Famer. I mean, there's no doubt, there's no argument that can be made. What he accomplished in the amount of time that he was in the NFL, if this is the last one, and maybe I honestly don't believe it is, but if he is a Hall of Famer, and he'll go down as the a top 5 defensive end all time in NFL history. But this is a what have you done for me lately league. And when those contract extension or the contract talks and the decision to potentially move on or, keep him around start to come around, try not to, and this is hard. It's hard for me. It's hard for a lot of people. It's hard to be able to put into perspective the business and the personal, but try to approach it from a business perspective. Try to understand that what is best for this team moving forward, and don't look in the past to make that decision. And like I said, it's hard. It's really hard to do. I had to do it with Kobe. I didn't want to pay him after he tore his Achilles. They decided to. It's very cutthroat. But at the end of the day, if you want to have long-standing success, you can't put yourself in a position financially to pay somebody that is not worth the amount of money that is being paid. And it can handicap you moving forward. So we're not there yet. We still have 6 games to go. So, or actually more than that, I think. Is it 6? Yeah, no, 8 games to go. We still have 8 games to go. So there's a lot to figure out in between that time. This even though he's out for the season, it may not be as bad as people think. Just because you're on IR doesn't necessarily mean it's a career-threatening injury. And a torn pectoral, we saw Whitney Merciless come back from that in a year. He could come back next year and just be totally fine. And all these conversations that are being had about how he should retire and all that, it might be wasted. But I just think that JJ in this time with his injury is just in a different place than where he was the previous couple times. And I feel like he feels he had a lot to prove at that time. I think now JJ's okay with I don't think he's in a space where he feels he has to prove anything anymore. I think he realizes that his legacy is already established and what he's accomplished will go down in the record books and people will remember him for that. What I don't want is for JJ to come back and not be able to live up to the expectations that may be there for him, because we see that a lot with athletes. And then that tends to water down the legacy. All right. I think that's really enough about JJ Watt. It's sad.
Yeah. I don't think that he's going to retire, but I do think that it's the end of the era. And I don't know what we're going to do because we can't pay him. We cannot pay him what he deserves on or off the field. We just can't.
Can't.
Best case scenario, even though it's absolutely illegal, is the Texans have some sort of a handshake deal with him. And it's like when you retire, you become part of like the president, kind of like Elway has with the Broncos, where hopefully with less player personnel power than Elway, because Elway's, yeah. But JJ essentially gets brought into the ownership group, like some sort of handshake deal with him. That way he pays at below level contracts, because don't forget, he was absolutely, he was having a great year until he got hurt. But we cannot sink the $100 million plus into him on his next contract that he has earned and hope to be a competitive team, because there won't be any left over for the defense.
Yeah. So let's get into the defense, John, because I honestly think that, oh God, this is something else, but I think the defense might be a little bit better off long-term this season without JJ Watt. And I know that's a stretch, but hear me out. I think Romeo is somewhat limited with the looks that he can give when JJ Watt is on the D-line. JJ likes his spots. He likes to be lined up in certain places. And it doesn't really give you a ton of freedom as a defensive coordinator. Now, even though we have a lot of unproven guys, we still do have a good core, with DJ there in the middle, Whitney, Charles Omenihu was looking like a player. I'm not going to say that Charles Omenihu is the answer. I know that seems to be the hot take going around town. I was listening to 610 earlier this morning and, in the afternoon, and Clint Sterner said that Charles will fill that role. I don't think people realize what that role entails, but whatever. I think that this gives Romeo the ability to be a little bit more creative. I think we'll see a lot of different looks from Romeo. I think we have the potential to. I don't know if we will. I think that we can, though. I think this gives Romeo the ability to kind of go out there and do what we've seen from Romeo when JJ has been gone. I mean, don't forget this team was the number one defense one of the years that JJ was out, when it was Merck and JD. Now we don't have JD. Funny how that came back to bite us in the ass, but that's another story to have over a beer. But I think
We've sworn off talking about JD.
Yeah, but this kind of brings all that back up, though, John.
I know, but we've sworn it off, and I'm going to try and spin this positively because it's the same thing about what you're saying. If you look at the personnel that we've put together, we have put together a very Patriot-esque defense. Like, if you look at the type of personnel and the type of boxes that they try to fit their personnel into, we've got the speed guy with Martin. We've got the flex guy in O'Mahue. Our linebacker core is absolutely amazing. We got Merciless, who can both be a pass rusher and stops the line. And then we do have Merciless, who can generate some heat. And two great interior players, and especially with Reader. So our defense is going to hurt because we don't have a pass rush, but at the same time, our defense has always been better since Rack has been here without JJ. Which is two things that are kind of sacrilegious to say. But if you look at it statistically, does that mean that I think... Because here's the thing about this statistically, when they say the defense was better, yeah, they gave up less yards. It's terrifying for me not to have somebody out there like JJ, because who's going to come up with the big play? But from a positive aspect, the defenses without JJ that Rack has had have both been better.
And that's just a fact. It's not something that we're just making up. I mean, it's an actual fact. It's true. The defenses have been better as a whole without JJ on it. And that's not to diminish JJ Watt and what he is capable of doing. It just gives Rack the ability to kind of move pieces around and do some different things and give offenses different looks. And so I think it's going to be interesting to watch moving forward how this defense looks and what is accomplished. You know, the corners have to get healthy. I really can't say that enough. You know, we saw it this week. The Raiders aren't a team with a deep wide receiver room. Okay. Tyrell Williams is their best wide receiver. So, you know, but we got dusted and they played really well. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that we were playing inexperienced corners and everybody else was hurt. So it's going to take some time, but you know, playing the Jags this week, it's going to be a tough game. But I think maybe we can pull it off. I wouldn't be surprised if we lost this game. And a lot of it just has to do with the London factor.
Actually, no, it's kind of the perfect game to go into of our situation, because our ability to stop the run is still there. And we've talked about Gardner Minshew. He is Case Keenum with a mustache, and that's at his best. So I know we're not in the preview yet, but this is kind of the best game to go into that situation. So let's not get too negative about that. However,
well, the only reason I say that, I don't think that they're a better team. I think that even with all the injuries, I think we're a better team. It feels like one of those games that there's just a lot to overcome. And I think with the offensive line at the state that it's currently in, you know, they have a lot of speed rushers. They're not a lot of power guys. We saw what happens to Chris Clark with speed rushers. We saw it with Roger Johnson too the week prior. I just don't know if this is the type of game that we come in and just, you know, we win. I'm not saying we won't. If we lost, I guess is what I'm saying, I wouldn't be surprised. Not expecting us to lose. But if we did lose, I wouldn't be surprised. But the bye is coming after that, and it really honestly couldn't come at a better time. And we were missing 6 starters, 7 total starters throughout the game. And the corners are just, I mean, depleted is really the only word you can use. I mean, they truly are depleted. And they're going to need time to get everybody back. Maybe Roby comes back after the bye. From what I hear, that's when he should come back. That'll be helpful. Gary Conley will be clicking a little bit, have, a nice bye to be able to get acclimated to the defense. Lonnie will get out of the concussion protocol. Jonathan Joseph's going to be back this week. It'll give Gippy some time to be able to get healthy as well. So it's just it's a lot of things that need to happen. But if you look at our schedule isn't very complicated moving forward. Ravens Patriots are the two games that I look at and I'm like, okay, those are the tough ones. And the Ravens specifically because of what they do from a matchup perspective. But I still think that we can end up winning, another 5 or 6 games and really either winning the division or getting a wild card spot. And at the end of the day, that's all you wish for. So yeah, I think eventually the defense will be fine. They need to figure it out and everybody needs to get healthy. So, all right, John, I'm trying to think as far as from like a game perspective. I mean, the game was sloppy at times. We started off slow. We ended up getting to win. That's what you look for. Nacho was very upset yesterday in the Discord because he was upset at how the team was playing. And I totally agree. I feel like we played down to our competition. But, I also think that Raiders team, we said it last week, I think that Raiders team is a lot better than people give him credit for. John Gruden's really doing a hell of a job with the Raiders. I mean, he really is, given the talent that they have on that team. Derek Carr's having his career year from a accuracy perspective. Not a lot of turnovers. He looks a lot more comfortable in the pocket than he has in years past. And I think the Raiders team, I think they're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, they're a slightly better than 500 team. They're one of those teams that if they get a couple of lucky breaks, they're going to end up having a great record. They're also one of those teams that if they get a couple of unlucky breaks, they're going to end up having a bad record. They're, as much as everybody wants to kind of think of Gruden as a joke, he's actually a really good coach. And surprisingly, he's doing it. Their defense is actually very, very good. Now, I understand that people feel like, oh, they're giving up because they just traded their former first-round corner to us. They've also developed figured out that Travion Mullins is a better fit for what they're trying to do with more of the zone coverages. And again, the NFL kind of is an 8-8 league. Like you look at all these things that they do all year round, and just look at the Texans in particular, how we came into the season and what our plans were, and look at how the roster was constructed. And then people start getting hurt left and right, and it's how do you adjust? Or people start to play down and not do what you expect them to do, and how do you adjust? The NFL really is an 8-8 league, and then you have to have a quarterback or a genius coach that elevates you. And we have a very good quarterback that elevates us. Coaching, we'll see, because Bill O'Brien and Rack are about to have a pretty tough job. And right now, offensively, Bill O'Brien has all the pieces he wants. Rack probably doesn't have the pieces he wants, but I mean, he's got enough there that we should still be competitive. And honestly, with our starting lineups, honestly, there's a lot of players on the Raiders team that just from the players that started the game yesterday that we would have been very happy to have on our side.
Yeah, I agree. And I think also a lot of, that needs, or something that needs to be talked about in the sense of Gary Conley is just the fact that, Mike Mayock and John Gruden weren't the front office that drafted him. And you see it a lot in the NFL. You see it here even. We've seen it here multiple times. These guys, they build their teams the way that they want to build them. They want players that they've drafted, that they've selected, that they've developed. And Gary Conley just isn't that guy. And so they decided to move on. It's not necessarily an indictment on Gary and Conley. It's more of an indictment on just how they want to run their team and what they're looking for in their corners. And Gary just was not a fit for them. But Garion is a fit for us and has the potential to be a really good corner for us. And that's why we made the trade. So I just think that part seems to be left out a lot when this whole trade aspect, the whole aspect of this trade being discussed is left out. All right, John, we go to London next week. We're going over the lake. We're going to play the Jags in London. It's the Texans' first game in London.
My wife's pretty pissed because she's doing the run for the water. I think it's it's a 10K. Is that right? 10K. And it's the same time the football game is.
So are you gonna miss the game?
No.
I was to say, I don't understand how people miss games.
I mean, it's one of the, like, seriously, I love my wife. But let's be honest here. It's not like I can sit in the stands and cheer her run. Even at best, you see her for 5 seconds at the end of the race.
Well, it's funny because, like, and maybe this is a conversation that we could have another time. But I've never missed a game.
I have, unfortunately, I have.
I haven't, and I see people like, had to go do this, had to go to practice, had to go pick up the kids, I ask for 16 Sundays for 3 hours a year. Outside of that, I am totally dedicated to every responsibility that I have. I don't understand missing a game. I don't understand it. It just doesn't make any sense to me, unless it's an emergency. Something happens where you got to go to the hospital, things like that. That makes sense, but because of the honeydew list, I don't understand missing a game because of the honeydew list.
Well, for 15 years, I worked every Sunday.
See, so
that sucked.
That's different. When I was
and then,
a general manager, I worked Sundays too. But guess what? I left at 11:55 and made sure I had coverage to be able to do so.
Yeah, I worked every Sunday for a long time, and then unfortunately, you do have family responsibilities, and depending on the circumstances, and like, yeah, no, I get what you're saying. It's 16 Sundays a year. However, for me, it's a little bit more because I also watch a lot of college football.
Oh, see, I
watch just about every Astros game and every Rockets game.
I only watch playoffs, and then my wife goes to bed at 9:30, so I get to watch every Laker game. So
yeah, my wife is really one of those football widows during the fall. Like, we don't have plans during the weekend. Like, she actually apologizes to me that there was a race. Like, so to put it in perspective, I'm actually pretty ridiculous, but yeah, I may miss a little bit of the game, but that's what record's for. And it's a little bit tougher now because we do try to interact on Twitter and things like that, but I never do anyway. So what's the big deal?
I like the 8:30 kickoff. It makes me feel like I'm in California. All the games are on at 10 o'clock in California. It's really nice. But at the end of the day, whatever. All right, so we're going to London. Jags have a ton of experience in London. They pretty much play there every year. This will be the first time the Texans have played in London. I'm not really expecting that to really be too impactful. I think this is a game we should win. But like I said earlier, if we lost this game, I wouldn't be disappointed and I wouldn't be upset. We have a ton of injuries. We're dealing with a whole lot of new things right now that we're trying to figure out, from the right tackle to losing J.J. Watt to all new starters at corner, losing our starting safety. It's just, it is what it is. Like, let's get to the bye. If we go to the bye and we're 5-4, is it ideal? No, I'd love to be 6-4 or 6-3. What are we? 6. So we'd be 6-3. Fine. Like, I don't know. I'm not really putting a lot of stock into it. I'd love to have a win. If we can do it, great. But if we don't, the world's not on fire. I still think that we have a really good chance, given our schedule, to finish pretty strong.
Yeah, and at this point, a first round bye, which a couple of weeks ago was the goal, I don't think that's realistic now. Just make it to the playoffs and make it to the playoffs healthy. I think this team, if we get to the playoffs and we are healthy, we can make some noise and definitely at least be better than last year.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean,
again, it's just, as we're right now at the point that, like we said a little while ago, our team is beginning to be built around Deshaun Watson, and we're going to go as far as him. And he's definitely developing. I mean, even when he doesn't have a great statistical game, he has good games. And you saw there's not many teams that can completely shut down the middle of the field like the Panthers. And that's the key to beating him right now, is have linebackers that can cover like safeties. I mean, there's not a lot of teams out there that have that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, with this team, sure. I still think there's 4 teams that could get that other spot: Indianapolis, Baltimore, us, Chiefs. It's going to be a little harder for the Chiefs, just given with what they're doing with Mahomes. But I definitely think, if we can win this game and go into the bye being 6-3, I think the number 2 seed is ours to lose at that point. And And you have opportunities to take advantage of that by playing the Ravens and by playing the Patriots. It is a week-to-week league. Like, the Patriots look like the most dominant team in the NFL, but one injury or anything can happen, and you just never know. It doesn't happen to them, but maybe this is the year it does. But
well, that actually goes back to our discussion about JJ Watt. It does happen to them, except they have
like quarterback.
Yeah, well, other than Brady. But all the injuries that we always complain about, they have the same issues. They just have a different philosophy on roster building, and it seems that is actually what the Texans are starting to embrace.
Yep.
We'll see if it continues. But we were in an impossible situation with JJ and Jadeveon Clowney, and especially those two. I mean, you just pulling the plug on Jadeveon Clowney was painful. Pulling the plug on JJ, maybe like letting a loved one, like a literal loved one, walk out the door. But to get to a place where we can survive injuries that happen in football, and they happen to every single team, those are the type of decisions that will have to be made.
Yeah. All right. Before we get to predictions, one last thing about JJ Watt. Keep in mind when you guys are thinking about JJ or talking about JJ, what does JJ want to do? A lot of times in sports, we get selfish and start to think of what we want these people and these players to do. But at the end of the day, they are people. And, it's JJ's decision. So what JJ wants to do with his future and how he wants to approach this, whether it be rehab, hang him up, whatever it would be, make sure that you're taking into consideration what JJ wants to do. And it's not our decision. So, if he makes a decision you don't agree with, let it be. All right. Predictions, John. Jacksonville, Houston, in London, Wembley Stadium. What happens?
Thank God we're playing the Jaguars. They're not the glitter kitties of old, but thank God we're playing them. If there's a team right now that we match up against, it's them. Minshew, noodle arm, porn stash, superstar, scares me a little bit because he is incredibly smart. He does know where to go with the ball. However, he doesn't really have the arm to beat us deep, which I think could be a big issue. And our secondary, as long we have Justin Reed out there, so it should be able to maintain. DJ Chark, their receiver, their second-year receiver, he looks like he's turning into a stud. And then Fournette, that's going to be their offense. Those two players. Running backs don't scare me with the way this team is currently constructed. It doesn't matter whom we've played so far. We've been able to shut them down from running the ball. Even though at times it feels like a roller coaster, because sometimes it seems like the opposing team's running backs get just hot enough to scare us when the score's close. But overall, as a team, I'm not too worried. This is the team for us to play. Now, stating that, with our injuries and especially on our offensive line, I do still think that this is going to be a slugfest, and I think it is going to be close because every game is close. However, again, thank God we're playing the Jaguars this week, because if we were playing, there's several other teams that if we were playing this week, I would just be scared out of my mind. But with them, we're going to come in and we're going to have more than a puncher's chance against them.
I'm expecting us to win. I think it'll be close. I think that the Jags always play us close. The one thing I will say that tends to be forgotten going into this game is the fact that there is no Jalen Ramsey to defend DeAndre Hopkins. And the one cornerback in the entire league who's always played DeAndre Hopkins extremely well and even made it a point this offseason to specifically get better at covering DeAndre Hopkins was Jalen Ramsey. That guy is gone now. So at the end of the day, maybe we end up having a big day because of Jalen being missing and DeAndre having a great game. And if we lose, like I said, it's not the end of the world. But I expect us to win. All right, John, anything else? Oh, we need to get into the current standings of the AFC South. Colts are 5-2. They snuck one in there at the end, and they should not have been able to. They were in a position to lose that game, should have lost that game. It was the most disappointing thing I've ever watched because that's what led into the next game, which was Texans and Raiders. But they kicked a field goal at the end and won. Well, fuck the Colts. All right. Jags won. Titans won. Titans should have lost as well. And the Texans are 5-3. So there's that. All right. Anything else before we get out of here, John?
Yeah. Just stating that, AFC South isn't a dumpster fire.
No, everybody's at least 500.
Yeah. So no matter what, we can be proud of how it ends.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I mean, the teams are, they're competitive to say the least. So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully the Titans aren't rolling in December since we play them twice, but we'll see. They have a good defensive front. I like their defense. I like what Vrabel's doing in their defense.
They have a fantastic defense, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Yep, absolutely. All right. And with that being said, I am Young Ari Gold signing off for Texans Unfiltered. We'll catch you guys next week.
Loved this episode of Texans Unfiltered? We'd love for you to be a Patreon supporter. Your support allows us to provide you with the best Texans podcast possible. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at HoustonFBPod and everywhere podcasts can be found. And join our community on www.texansunfiltered.com or on Discord at Texans Unfiltered. Thank you for listening. Until next time.